G'day guys, this is Andrew Price here from BlenderGuru.com and welcome to a new tutorial on the new Blender Guru site. So if you missed the announcement, the site has changed and I hope you like it. But yeah, in this video we're going to be creating what you can see right here, which is a hand grenade or pineapple grenade or whatever you want to call it. So I'll just show you what the scene is made up of briefly. There is, of course, the grenade itself, which is a little bit tricky to model, but I'm going to show you a few different methods and tricks in order to create this result here. And then as well as that, we're also going to be, of course, modeling this top part here using the solidify modifier, mirror modifiers, and things like that. And then more importantly, we're going to be getting into the materials. So this is something a lot of you have been requesting tutorials on, is yeah, how to do texturing basically. So I'm going to walk you through what all these different functions here do, how it affects your model, you know, how to overlay different textures over the top in order to create kind of a more realistic bump mappy type look. And yeah, it gives a decent enough looking result. As well as that, for lighting, we're also going to do some HDR lighting. So this is something a few of you have been requesting tutorials on as well, is how to light an image using an HDR image. So although it's not the exact you know, way that other softwares do it, because Blender can't actually do it that way, it is as close to real as we can get. But yeah, it's really cool, and it saves you a lot of time. As well as that, there's also a little bit of compositing as well, but yeah, we'll get to that when we get there. And also just want to state, before we start, I'm not creating this tutorial to glorify weapons of war, really. If anything, it's really to, I suppose, draw to how violent and mean they are, really. I mean, this is a two-part tutorial, so in part two we're going to be disintegrating this grenade into different fragments and shrapnel and things like that. And yeah, it's not at all to glorify it. In fact, I had an encounter with a real grenade a few years back when I was in the army. I'll share a story on that later on in the tutorial. That's good. No one's switching off now. Everybody wants to hear that story. But yeah, so I know they're not fun, and I'm not at all trying to glorify it. Cool. So anyway, let's go ahead now and get into a new scene in Blender, and we are going to get cracking. So first thing I'm going to do is delete the default cube, and I'm also just going to add a background image. Okay. So it's important before you start any project that you have a reference image. So let me just locate it on here. Reference images. Okay, so this image I'm using is of a gold grenade, so assumingly this isn't a real grenade, but I couldn't actually find an image on Flickr that was a real grenade that I could actually use that had the Creative Commons license on it. But this is pretty much exactly how they look anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Now I'm just going to shrink the size of the image down to 2, just to make it easier to, you know, fit the scene or whatever. And I'm also just going to use these X and Y there just to position it so that the center of the grenade is where that little 3D cursor is right there. That just makes it a little bit easier for us later on. And then once we've done that, we can get into modeling. Now the base, the model for the grenade, we're actually going to use a UV sphere. Now by default it gives you this sphere right here, which is, it gives you way too many faces, because what we actually want is we want each one of those faces to be one of these panels on the side of the grenade. Okay, so you're looking at the image from this front view here. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 panels going across, and then if you can imagine the same on the other side, so that's 8 panels going around the circumference of the grenade, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 for the top, and then 8 for the bottom. Just include them. So that means we need 8 segments and 8 rings. Okay, so let's just add in a UV sphere. And then in the toolbar, let's just make that 8 segments and 8 rings. Okay, cool. So now we've got this object right here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale it along the Z axis. So hit S and then Z. Okay, and then just line it up as best you can. Doesn't really matter too much. You can just rearrange it like this. Okay. Alright, pretty good. And I'm also just going to scale it up just a little bit, just so that it actually fits the width of the image, basically. So just like that. That's pretty good. And now I've got to move these around again. But anyway, you get the hang of it. So it's it looks like quite a hard object to model, but once you see and you learn just a few tricks on extruding it and things like that, you'll see very quickly just how easy it is. Okay, so now we've got that basic shape there. I'm just going to delete the top and bottom vertex like that. Hit remove. And what we want to do is we actually want to extrude each of these faces outwards, okay? Now, if you went by and just, selected these one by one, then extruded it, and then went to the next one, it would take you a really long time, and they'd also be differing lengths. So if you wanted to save time, you might think, oh, well, let's just select all of them, then hit extrude. But that doesn't help either, because then it just creates basically a duplicate object, so we don't want that. What you actually want to do is you actually want to hit in the toolbar, extrude individual, okay? Now when you click that, you'll see this happen, where you get individual vertexes, or vertices. You don't want that either. What you want to do is, first of all, make sure you are in face select mode, and then click extrude individual. And now you can see that each of those faces are being extruded according to their individual size, basically. So something like, I don't think that's far enough. You've got to make sure that you extrude it far enough. Okay, so I think that's, yep, that's pretty good like that. And then once you've got that, you want to scale down the size of those faces. So if you just hit S and you scale it down, then they're all going to shrink inwards. But if you hit Alt S, it's going to shrink the faces according to their relative size. So something like that. That's pretty good. And now I just want to position these. Actually, no, before we do that, yeah, because we're going to be making a few more alterations to it, if I went around and did, selecting all the faces individually, it would take a very long time. So to save me some time and your patience for watching me do it all, I'm going to just cut the grenade in half, and then I'm going to cut the grenade in half again. Whoop. And then I'm going to go to the modifier stacker. Just move this around so we can see it better. Modifier stacker, and I'm going to turn on mirror, and then also turn on Y. So X and Y axes are selected, and also make sure you turn on clipping. And now you can control the entire grenade just by these, these two sort of columns there, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I've got that. I'm just going to go back into face select mode, and I'm just going to drag these down, because when you extrude it outwards, it extrudes it from the center of the grenade, and obviously we want them all to be looking a little bit more natural, so just position them one by one, just like this. Okay, relatively easy. Now the hardest part of this grenade is really the top part, because you can see at the top here, this panel here kind of smooths off, and you get these kind of pinched in lines there, and then it becomes smooth at the top of the grenade. So what we want to do is go into vertice mode, and I'm just going to select these three vertices, hit Alt M, and then select merge at center. Okay, so this is now creating that pinch effect where it's sort of going up to 1. It is creating triangular faces as well, which is, it's not a good habit to get into, but it's yeah, it's not going to make too much of a difference in this scene. So I'm just going to do the same for this, but I'm going to select at last, okay, because I want that to be snapped to the exact point where the mirror modifier is lining up. So select that one first, then that one, and then last, like so. Okay, cool. So now we've got it all pinched off at the top. It's not finished just yet. We want to make sure that we get this lined up to where that sort of pinching effect is happening there. And then I'm going to extrude it up and then extrude it inwards. Okay, so just like that. So we now have that sort of effect. And I'm also going to turn on the subsurface modifier like that. Now this is going to give it a very smoothed off look, and really it looks kind of like an exotic piece of fruit or a beehive or something. It looks absolutely hideous at the moment, but we're going to fix that shortly. So now that we're in this subsurf modifier, we can see that the top of the grenade isn't matching the reference image. It needs to be bigger. So I'm just going to grab those there, and I'm going to scale it outwards. Now one thing to note is if you scale it outwards like that, it's let me just check if that's happening properly. Actually, I think that's all right. the way it's scaling. Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes because it's we've only got sort of 1/4 of the mesh, when you scale it outwards, it's going to not scale it properly according to how it should be. Anyway, but this one is not turning out too bad, so that's all right. Okay, so something like that. I'll just drag that down to fit. And these ones here just need to be moved up a little bit, just so they're reaching the top a little bit better. Okay, cool. Now to tighten up these vertices, because it's looking very, very smooth at the moment, we need to add in some creases. Okay, so to get the creases, you just go, you press N to bring up this little N toolbar, whatever you want to call it, and you can just define sort of how sharp those are just by whatever amount you give that mean crease. So I'm going to set mine to 0.3. So that's going to give it to overall, give it a nice kind of sharper edge to those kind of panels here. And as well as that, I'm also going to tighten up these, because you've got these lines that are going down the middle of the grenade there, they need to be a little bit tighter than the rest of it. So, because these are going to be the main sort of grooves for the grenade, basically. Actually, I was reading for the grenade, the reason they make these grooves and the reason there's these panels basically for the grenade was that they wanted the fragments to be distributed or exploded in a kind of even distribution, so it creates like a shrapnel going in all directions. But apparently it wasn't until years later that they realized that it was actually pointless in them doing that, and it still was not equal at all. The only way that they could get even explosion kind of distribution was for the grooves to be on the inside of the grenade, not the outside. So it was actually kind of pointless them actually designing this this grenade. But anyway, kind of funny. So I've just selected those there, and I'm giving them a mean crease of 1. Okay, so that's maximum. And you just want to make sure you don't get any mean crease for these top ones or these bottom ones here as well. Because you don't want there to be a pinching effect around the top there, if that makes sense. Actually, for any of these. Okay, let's turn them all down to 0. Okay, those ones there as well. Alright, now, as well as that, for this top here, what I need to do is remove these edges. Okay, so I'm just selecting those two sort of just underneath it, and I'm going to remove them. And what I'm going to do is create some more triangles. Big no-no, but it's alright. It's not too bad. Just for these points right here, I'm going to create a face and another face right there as well. And now that we've got that, we can just grab these edges here. I can then just pull them inwards. This is the point. See, you can see here when we scale inwards, they're kind of, it's not giving an even scaling around the grenade. They're kind of like just pinching in between these 2 points. So what you need to do is change the pivot point. So first thing I'm going to do is just move the cursor to the center of the grenade like that. And then in edit mode down here, I'm going to change the pivot point to be 3D cursor. And now when I scale inwards, it's going to go in towards that 3D cursor, which is kind of dragging it downwards. But now I can just sort of pull it upwards along the Z-axis. And at least now it's an even kind of circular scaling, if that makes any sense. Which it probably doesn't. Anyway. Okay, so something like that I think should be fine. And I'm also going to grab this vertex there, that vertex, and that vertex. You can see I'm using the word vertex now, guys, because I got so sick of all the emails from people telling me, Andrew, you can't say vertice if it's only 1 point. Because I would say, let's select this vertice, and people said, no, you've got it all wrong. And I said, who cares, honestly? No, it's alright. I should get into the habit of saying it correctly. Okay. Alright. This, I should say, is pretty much the most fiddliest part of this tutorial, really. It's pretty annoying. Especially the top part of the grenade. It took me a while to kind of figure out how to get it looking correct. But this is what I discovered, and this is what I'm teaching you now. And if you want, you can also create a little cut along the top there. So if you select all the vertices, then hit K, and holding down K, if you just drag across it like that, then it creates that that cut there. And then now, I can select S, Z, and then I can just make that a flat line, and then I can pull those sort of inwards just to create more of a slope if you want. So that's just something you can do. Anyway, it's a little bit... You know what? I might just go ahead and remove that. Because I don't think we actually need it. It's looking good enough, I think. Alright, and I'll just quickly fix up the bottom here. You don't need to go into as much detail at the bottom there. Because it's... yeah, it's at the bottom of the grenade. You're not going to be able to see it that well anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. I'm just going to grab those 3 vertices there, and I'm going to extrude them inwards. Let me just go to top view. You know what's funny is this is, I think, the 5th time I've recorded this tutorial. The 5th, that's right. So if you see me making a mistake, that's more embarrassing than it should be because I've done it 5 times now. But yeah, I attempted a few times and things kept going wrong. And then last night, it was like midnight, almost before going to bed. And then I was finally happy. I finally finished the entire tutorial. It was an hour long. And I was like, yay! And I went to have a look at the video and there was no audio whatsoever. And I was angry because I was using this software called Camtasia Studio. And I thought, oh, this stupid software just decided not to record my audio. So I called them out on Twitter, like the company who made this software, and I was like, oh, I'm angry at your software. And then I logged in this morning and I checked and my microphone wasn't actually plugged into my computer. So that was, of course, the reason why there was no audio. And I felt a little bit foolish and I had to apologize on Twitter. And anyway, good fun. Okay, I'm going to quickly save this before it crashes. So now we've got the base of this grenade set up. What we're going to model now is the top part, this clip. We're going to get into the texturing after that, which is a little bit more exciting. But for this top part, what I'm going to do is just model it off a plane, okay? Now, I'm not going to give the metal any thickness at all, okay? So it's just essentially going to look like paper, okay? Like the paper thickness, basically. But don't worry, because we're going to be using a special modifier, which is going to give it some thickness, okay? Again, I'm going to use a mirror modifier now, so let's just go, excuse me, mirror modifier, like so, turn on clipping. I think you might want to use the Z axis, I think that's right. Okay, yep, that's fine, just like that. Now turn on clipping, and then you want to extrude them inwards, like so. So now you've got that happening, and now after that you want to add a subsurf modifier so that it smooths it off, like so. Make sure you turn on smooth shading, and I think we might also just need to give this a little bit more thickness, so just pull that out a little bit, and I'm going to add a little loop cut in, just like that, and another one right there. Actually, no, don't need one right there, not yet, okay. I'm going to extrude that across, and you can see at the bottom here we've got kind of like this little clip, kind of, I don't know if it's what you call it, a clip. I don't know what it does really, I'm sure it's something, but in all the reference photos I saw of grenades, there's this little clip underneath it, so I assume it's important for something. Yeah, something like that. That's doesn't really matter all that much. And we also want to make sure that it's extruded like across, basically, so that it's from connecting those 2 points together. So I'm going to go into edge select mode, and I'm just going to select these, not that one, not those ones, not you, not you, not you, and yeah, we'll do you. Okay, so let's just extrude those inwards like that till they connect. If you've got clipping turned on, they should snap together like that, which is just what you want. And now for those points, I'm also going to turn up the, what's it called, the crease amount. So just go to N and then turn the median crease all the way up, just like so. Perfect, and I'll do the same for that one there as well. Alright, not bad, not bad. And I'm just going to add a loop cut in there, a loop cut in there, and another loop cut in here. And I'm doing that to get it around this this hole there, because we're going to have to drop a hole in. So I'm going to go into face select mode and then just hit X and then just select face. So we've now got a nice hole there. And I'm going to do the same up here. Holes are always really annoying when it comes to modeling something, because you either have to use like a bowline thing to kind of cut a hole in it, which always looks messy in Blender, or you have to do this method, which gives you all these edge loops around things you don't really need, except for a hole. Anyway, so we've done that. That's pretty cool. And I'm also just going to give, I should give this a median crease there as well. Okay, cool. And you can see you've got this kind of awful shading thing happening at the bottom there. When you get that, add an edge split modifier. And always set the split amount to be 60 or 80. Something like that's fine. And I think there's a pinching that's happening there, so I might just remove the median creases for these ones. Maybe. What is happening there? Alright, well those points should be... I've got some doubles in there for some reason. That shouldn't be happening. I'll turn that median crease off. I think... Well, that's very weird, isn't it? Maybe I should drop a little edge loop in there. And then... You know, I hate it when I'm doing a tutorial and then something doesn't work and I look like a fool. It happens a lot, actually. What is going on there? Maybe I should just add an edge loop. Drag it down. Oh, I know why. Because I've actually... there shouldn't actually be any of this inside it. Yeah, that's right. Okay, well that saved me some time. Alright, well now I've got an edge loop where there doesn't need to be one. Great, things are going perfectly here, aren't they? This is amazing. So this is what to do when you screw it up and you don't know what to do next. Oh boy. Okay. There we go. Problem solved. That's alright. It's got an awful something happening. Oh, here we go. No, I can see it now. Remove that edge. Okay, awesome. Gee, alright. You know, if I was really narky, I would edit that part out of the tutorial, but at least now you know that you're not the only one that hits these roadblocks in your scene sometimes, and you just want to pull your hair out. Happens to everyone. Okay, now we've got the clip set up. Now we're going to give some thickness to that metal, because that currently, as I said, is looking paper thin. So let's add a solidify modifier. Really cool modifier. Always works brilliantly. And we're just going to turn that thickness up. Okay, just like that. And it's looking great. And you just want to make sure that you position that underneath the subsurf modifier, but yeah, above the edge split. So just move it up one position. And there we go. We now have some nice thick looking metal and it's looking great. It's probably a little bit too thick, so something like that is fine. And now just very quickly, man, we're coming up to half an hour into this tutorial. We've only done the modeling. It's just one of those things, I tell you. We're just going to position this at the top, and this is of course going to be the handle. Okay, so something like this should be right. And I'm just going to drag this down to make that handle there. Drag it downwards. Okay. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to extrude it. And this is just going to make that little lip. Because if you see in the reference image, there's that little lip on the edge there. So that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so something like that. Okay, and you want to make sure that the this handle is a lot bigger than the that thing underneath it, so that it's kind of overlapping it like that. And I'm also just going to enable mirror modifier as well, just now whilst we're here. Y, yes. Turn on clipping. Okay, and also subsurf modifier. Turn that on. And we want to make sure there's a loop just where this handle kind of bends at the top there, and then over there as well. Okay, so it's very quick, very easy, and I'm also going to add another loop cut. Drop that in about here. Yeah, that should be fine. And then another one right there. And I'm just going to grab those two vertices right there, extrude it out, and we're just going to create this little thing like that. Okay, that's very simple. And of course, we're going to add a solidify modifier coming up to the end now. Here we go. Give it a little bit of thickness. And then edge split. Okay, cool. Now you might also, just whilst we're here, you might want to create a little bit of a that thing that sticks out. So I'm just going to extrude that out like so. That is, of course, the technical term for it, the bit that sticks out. I'm going to give that a median crease like that. Okay. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's going to do for now. Okay, cool, awesome. So now if we gave this a quick render, we're going to have a very boring looking grenade. I mean, you could probably say, yeah, it looks like a grenade, but it's not exactly fantastic, is it? So now we're actually going to be becoming artists, and we're going to actually make it look half decent, hopefully. So we're going to remove the background image now. I'm going to go back into bounding box rotation like this. I'm just going to position it here, and I'm just going to convert this default lamp into a sun lamp just to give it a little bit more light, just so we can now see everything. And I'm just going to go ahead and render that. So first thing we want to do with our grenade is we're going to apply some nice textures and some shaders and stuff like that in order to get a realistic looking effect. So to do that, before we do it, we need to UV unwrap the grenade, because we're going to give it some textures. You won't get away with just using the default, generated texture mapping. Okay, so before you can UV unwrap it, we need to make sure that we apply the mirror, because currently, you've only got 1/4 of the mesh there, so it's not going to work. So apply the mirror. Oh, not in edit mode. Apply it. And now we have control over the entire grenade like that. And this isn't the best way to do it, but it's the quickest way. I'm just going to select the entire back side of the grenade. Because it's facing away from the camera, you can get away with it. I'm just going to drag, just going to give a seam right along the back there. Just mark seam, like so. So that's essentially just cutting it just down the back there. And I'm also going to give a seam, let's just hide this clip for now because we don't need it. I'm going to give a seam for each of these points here at the top. Mark seam, and then the same for the bottom ones. A good rule of thumb, if you're having trouble figuring out how to UV unwrap something, is just imagine that the entire thing is made out of paper and that you want to cut it and make it flat with the rest of the scene. That's kind of a good sort of rule of thumb to give it. Anyway, now you've done that, let's go ahead and open up the UV image editor. Drag across, UV image editor. I'm going to hit unwrap. And if you've done it correctly, you should see something like this, which, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, it does look a bit wonky and it's not perfect. And if you want to, what you can actually do is, this is another cheap method of doing something, but I select the top vertices like that. If it's kind of like in that curvy shape, I just hit S, Y, then 0, and I make it flat, and then I extrude it, just sort of make it fill out like that. Then I hit P, and then I do the same thing. P, by the way, pins it, so it doesn't move. And then I do the same for these bottom ones right there, S, Y, 0, and then P to pin. And now, if you UV unwrap it again, you should see it kind of straightens it out a little bit more. So that's just a quick, nasty method for cheating, essentially. So, yeah. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extrude it just so that it fills the image a little bit better. And I might also just drag these down a little bit, hit P, and unwrap it again. Oh no, I shouldn't have done that. Okay. Yeah, that's that's going to do. Alright, so now we've UV unwrapped it. Very successfully, I might add. Very successfully. So, now what we're going to do is we're going to actually do some texture painting. That's something I didn't say at the start there, but what we want to do is we want to make it so that these grooves here have like a dark, kind of grimy, dirty look to it. And if you just use textures over the top of it, I mean, it's not going to happen. So you really need to actually paint into those grooves there, and that's going to give you a more realistic, dirty type looking grenade. So yeah, if you've never done texture painting, get prepared to learn something new. First thing we need to do is create a new image, okay? So this pop-up box here is going to ask you for some details. I'm going to set the width of it to 2000 and the height of it to 2000. Now that is pixels, by the way, so it's going to be a 2000 by 2000 image. Depending on how close the camera is going to be to it, that's how you can determine how big the image needs to be, if that makes sense. Now for the image name, you need to give it a name. I'm going to call mine Grenade Painting Tot, okay? And I'm also going to click OK. And now when you do that, You see we have a nice big black image in the background. Before you do anything though, make sure you save the image onto the hard drive somewhere, because if you don't, it looks as though the image is ready to go and it's saved into the blend file. Then you'll save the blender file, and then there won't actually when you reopen the image won't be there, because it's just kind of saved in the cache. So until you save it to your hard drive, it's not, any changes you make to it aren't going to be saved really. So I'm just going to drop it in right there, and I'm just going to hit save image as, or save as image. Okay, so now we've done that, now we can actually get into the painting. So go down there and we're going to enable image paint mode. And if you go into tab over there, you can actually see the overlaying mesh basically. And what we want to do is we actually want to paint in here where the grooves are. So this white paint there, that's going to act as when we use it in the texture modifier, when we use it in the textures, we're going to flip it and make it so that that appears black, and we're going to overlay it over the top of the grenade, and it's going to look nice. But I'm actually going to use a tablet, okay? Now if you don't have one of these, that's perfectly fine. When I first did my result, I just used the mouse and it looked just as nice, but tablet just saves you a bit of time basically. So I'm going to hit Control Up to make it full screen, and now I'm going to go down here and click that little button there, and that's going to enable a tablet pressure sensitivity. So now if I press with the pen, the harder I press, the bigger the brush gets. So that's kind of really handy to have that feature. So now I'm just going to start at the top of the groove there, and just as I press down, I'm just going to get harder and harder just to make these grooves bigger. And we're just going to drag that all the way down to the bottom there. And we have to do this for each of the grooves in the grenade, which now I think is a good time to tell my story for the grenade. As I said, I used to be in the Australian Army Reserves, and as part of the basic training camp, you go out field and they teach you all about the guns and weapons, etc. And one day they told us they were going to give us a grenade demonstration. So they took us out to this area, and it was in the bushlands, and they had us all sit down, and the sergeant took out this grenade. And I should state, by the way, the grenades, modern grenades nowadays, just look like a can. So if you've ever played Counter-Strike, just imagine that grenade. And he took it out and he said, okay guys, this is the grenade. He reminded us all about the kill radius being 100 meters. So if you're within 100 meters of the grenade, you die. And then if you're within 200 meters, you have a very high chance of being significantly maimed, which really blew my mind, really. Anyway, so he took this out. He gave us this whole big warning. He said, okay, there's a first aid kit over there if there's any problems. And he got it ready. And he removed the pin from the grenade. And he drew his arm back. And then just as he was about to throw it, the grenade slipped from his hands and landed directly in front of us. So there's about 40 of us sitting around watching, and the grenade lands literally right in front of our feet. And the sergeant just turns around and just screams. That was all he did, just screams. And I leapt up from where I was and just started bolting, running as hard as I could. And because they told us that there's a 7-second delay on the grenade before it explodes. And so I thought, right, I got 7 seconds to run 100 meters. And I knew that sounds kind of impossible, but I was going to give it a shot, at least try and hide behind a tree or something. And then as I'm running, my heart is just pounding. I'm thinking, oh gosh, I am about to die. I'm about to see the white light. I am a goner. And then I heard laughter. And I turned around and the grenade was emitting smoke. And the sergeant, the corporal, everybody was just buckled over laughing. And they were pointing at me laughing, because as I turned around, a lot of the other soldiers were just sitting there still on the ground. And a few of them worked out that it was a prank, because they figured, why would they be demonstrating this in the bush when there's a kill radius of 100 meters and we're all just sitting there. But a few other people, like one of my friends, he said that he figured that it was a real grenade, and when it landed at his feet, he just accepted his fate, because he thought there's no way he could possibly run 100 meters. So he just sort of gave up and just like, all right, yeah, I guess this is the end then. But one other guy bolted as well, and I'll never forget that as the day that I thought I was about to die. It was seriously the worst thing ever. And actually, they told us later on that they do this kind of prank for like every new set of recruits that come through training. And they said like one of the guys actually bolted and ran straight headfirst into the car, like this Jeep that sits next to it. And he ran headfirst into it, and then he needed first aid treatment on his head. And I thought, wow, you know that, and you're still doing the prank. So anyway, there you go. All right, so now I've painted in each of those grooves where each of the grooves are on the mesh. So if we've done it correctly now, if I go over to here and then turn on textured viewport shading, you should see there's a white line down each of those grooves, which means we've done it correctly. By the way, if you want any extra tips on texture painting, there's a great tutorial on Blender Nerd by Greg Zahl, and he gives a few more tips on things like that. This is very basic texture painting. If you want, you can actually do texture painting from within the viewport, like here, and you can actually paint directly onto the model. It's a little bit slower, but yeah, it's very handy if you want to do that. Anyway, okay, so now we've got that done. Turn on solid view again. Okay. Now in the materials over here, I'm going to click new material, and the material I'm going to give it is a green color essentially. Now you want to make it nice and dark, and if you set it all the way green like that, it's going to always look fake. You want to make it look less saturated, so bring it forward towards the center of the color wheel, and that's going to desaturate it, and then drag it down till it's a nice kind of muddy military green color like that. And we're also going to turn, actually no, we'll leave the specularity on for now. So now if we go over to the texture panel, we're going to add a new texture, set it to image, and then we need to select the name of the image that we gave it. So it was grenade painting tut, and we need to change the mapping to UV. And I'm going to turn on both there just so we can see it as it's working away. If we click negative, that's going to invert the color. So now those lines that we drew are now black and the rest of it is white. And now if we change this to multiply, we've now got black lines over the top of the green color. So we've still got that color right there, and we've now got the black lines overlaying over the top of it. So now if we give it a render, it's hard to see it, but you can actually see that there's black lines that we've painted in there, and when we get into the rest of the lighting, you'll see it a lot more, but it now looks a lot more realistic than it would normally. So let's just turn it off. Actually, I don't know if you're actually going to see any difference really, but anyway, that's what it is there without it, and that's with it. You can see the difference. Just makes it a little bit darker on the center there, but it is very important, trust me. Okay, so let's just call this this texture mask. Now the next one I'm going to add is an image, and this is going to be a scratchy type texture, which I got off CG Textures. Let me see if I can find it. Scratches 00311, it's a good name, and it's essentially what you can see right there. And I'm going to set it to UV, of course. And what we want this to actually do, we don't want it to add any color to it. So if you rendered this right now, you would see that it's adding those scratches and coloring the entire thing. We don't want that. We actually want it to apply to the specularity of it. So specularity is that light that's shining off it. So we only want the light to shine off it where there is a scratch. So what I'm going to do is go down here, uncheck color, and turn on specular. Okay. Now, if you rendered it, you're not going to see any change to it really. You can't see any light hitting the scratches. And the reason for that is you need to make sure you check RGB to intensity. So check that. And now if you render it, you can now see that there's a little bit of light glinting off those scratches in there. So that's very important. We've got that. But what's more important is that once you turn on specularity in a texture channel, you need to go back to the material channel and turn off specularity, because you want all of the specularity to come from that texture now. So now you've done that, you can see you're getting more specular highlights there. And if you want it to be even more severe, you can turn the colors, like if you just set the contrast to become 2, then you're going to see even more like a harsher cut between the scratches. Because essentially looking at that image there, it means that all the darker areas, if it's completely pitch black dark, there isn't going to be any specularity. And if it's completely white, then there is going to be heaps of specularity. So if I just like tweak these results heaps like this, then you can make some really, really harsh looking scratches, but that actually turns out looking quite fake. So, whoa, what have I done? Yeah, so you just want to make it realistic-ish, so something like 1.5 or something. I don't know, something like that should be fine, I think. And also, if you do want to give some color to the scratches and sort of make them look grimy, like there's a little bit of dirt stuck into it, you can turn on color, and then under here for the color, just make sure that it's set to black. And now if you render it, over here you can see the scratches are now black, but then when they go underneath the light, then they turn up and they shine out, make it shiny, whatever. It's too much set to maximum color, so if I set that to 0.2, then it's just going to give some very subtle little scratches on the side. And also what you can do is give it some bump mapping, and this is kind of cool. If you just set that to 0.2 or something, you can see that those scratches now actually become dinted into the model, and it looks quite cool. It's too much set it that, so I usually set it to around about a 0.05, but even that is a little bit too extreme. So sometimes even just like a 0.02, if I can get it right. There you go. Yeah, that looks, it's doing a good enough job. Maybe even a 0.1, you know what? I mean, because you don't want it to look like it's been cut with like a scalpel knife or something. You want to make it look natural, and if you give it too much, it's going to look fake. So anyway, something like that I think looks pretty fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another texture. First, let's call that one scratches, like that. And this next texture, I am going to make it a grunge map, okay? So grunge map, what's it called? This one? Is it that one? I really don't know. Plaster white. Let me pause the record. Yes, grunge maps 24. Let's just add that in there. And I'm just going to make this a, set it to 0.5, give it multiply. And this is just going to color the mesh a little bit better. And make sure you change the mapping to UV as well. So this is just going to add a kind of grungy sort of look to the, to the material basically. And yeah, so that's not looking too bad. Just very, very subtle look to it. And yeah, let's just call that one, let's call it grunge. And the next one I'm going to give it, I'm going to call this one plaster. And this is going to be, give it really, really thick kind of bump mapping on the outside and really give it a really grungy type effect. So this is again one of CG Textures, and it is plaster white 151. So it's a really, really harsh type looking texture. We're going to change the mapping, of course, to be UV. Going to turn on multiply. Set the, I don't know, maybe 0.7 or something. And then also the bump mapping. Set that to, let's try 0.4 or something. It's probably going to be too much. Yeah, it's too much. Let's turn that down to 0.2. And it's looking a lot better, I think. And it's a little bit hard to see all the textures and stuff affecting the model at the moment because there's not really that good a lighting setup. So, but yeah, it should be looking nice. So, with that said, let's go ahead now and get into the lighting. The lighting, as I explained at the beginning, we're going to be using an HDR image to light the grenade, okay? So HDR image lighting is very popular in other software, 3ds Max, architectural visualization. They frequently use HDR images. And essentially it allows you to light a scene according to an image. You don't need really to do much else with it. Now, Blender doesn't really have the that feature. We've got something that fakes it quite well, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. So if you go to the world panel right here, and then go to textures, make sure that in the texture panel you've got that little world there turned on, or I don't know, the radio button. Anyway, just click it, and then we're going to add a new texture, set it to image, and the image we need to use an HDR image, okay? Now this is one that I found online somewhere. It's called Japan Blossom, so it's taken of like cherry blossom trees. It works quite well for the scene, so I'm just going to use that. Make sure you go underneath influence and turn on horizon, and more importantly is in mapping you need to change it to ang map, okay? Now that's a feature that's, or not a feature, an option really that's only used for this type of HDR image basically. So just set it to ang map, and then now go back to the world options and then turn on real sky. So now if you render it, you should see a background like so. But the cool thing about this is that if we, I'll just move the camera to a new layer just so I can rotate it. If we rotate the camera, let me just change this, 3D cursor. if I rotate it like that, you get always, every time you rotate it, you see a new part of the image. So it's essentially like that image has now become part of the world. And when you rotate it, you get to see more and more of that world. So you can rotate it up. If I rotate it like directly up, you're going to see the tops of the trees. You can see there. And then down here, you should see like a staircase. There you go. So it's, you can sort of see how it works, basically. Now what I want to do is position the camera to be about over here. And then pull it out a bit. And let's just bring back in the grenade there. Because you want a nice-ish looking background for it. So I might position it just a little bit up a bit, like that. And I also want to zoom the camera in, okay? So let's set it to 50. And that's just going to make it look like, you know, the camera was flying past or something and the cameraman had to zoom in on it. And it should look a lot nicer, I think. Oh. It's a little bit tricky trying to find the right background and also the one with the right lighting. But anyway, once you've got that in the background, that's actually not applying any lighting to the scheme at all. That's only giving it a background, plate essentially. So to make it so that it actually lights the scene, you need to turn on environment lighting and then change it from white to become sky texture. Now that's going to increase the render times by a fair bit, but it will enable it to light the scene now. So you can see you've now got some more even lighting over everything, and it looks a lot nicer. But in order to really see the effect, we want to give some reflectivity to the grenade. So underneath mirror, turn it on and set it to reflectivity of 0.2. And I'm going to set the gloss amount to a 0.7. Maybe turn the samples up to 20. It's really not going to have any effect on it, really. You really want to set that to like 50 or something, but it's really going to crank up the render times. And the Fresnel effect, I'm going to set that to 2, and that's going to make it so it doesn't light the entire thing, you know, like a piece of glass or whatever, but it changes according to the angle in relation to the camera. And I'm also going to change the blend to 1.5 as well. So now let's just quickly give this a render, and you should see now, you can see it's coming together a lot nicer. Now the grenade's actually reflecting the environment around it, and it's giving it a nice look to it. As you can see right there, it's coming together quite nicely. Okay, cool. You can't really see those scratches though for some reason. Anyway, I think that's probably because it's not catching the light of this sun lamp. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to rotate this sun lamp to about there. And I'm going to move it so that it's coming side on. And essentially you want to make it so that this side of the grenade is not receiving any light, okay? That's just, it's one of the things we want. And I'm also going to turn the amount of the sunlight up to 4. And that's going to make it look less like there's even lighting over everything and more like there's, you know, one direct light source, if that makes sense. So that should do a nicer job of it. And yeah, those scratch, it's kind of giving a specular channel to everything. So I think... let's just check. Okay, we've got specularity turned off there. I'll just check we haven't got specularity turned on in any of the other textures over here. Specular mix. Okay, we might actually have to turn that contrast up then to something like 2.5, just so that you can actually, you only really see it affecting those scratches, because otherwise it just doesn't, you can see it's like affecting everything there, which doesn't look nice. So something, yeah, you can see it now, like where the scratches are. The scratches are quite big though, so what I might do, I might just turn the repeat value for those up to 2, and that'll just essentially double the texture. The scratches will be a lot smaller, and it should be looking a little bit nicer than it was before. I can see there's a lot of specularity coming from that point right there, but anyway, it's not too bad, I think. Okay, make sure you've got ray shadow turned on for the sunlight as well. Okay, pretty good so far. Okay, cool. It's going to look a lot nicer once we get into the compositing as well. But for now, it's not looking too bad, I would say. Now we need to UV unwrap and texture the top part, this little clip here. So again, this is much of the same. It's applying the mirror modifier first of all, because we need to UV unwrap it, of course. So just applying that, and I'm going to be very nasty. Just drop a a seam in right there. Mark seam, and as well as that, let's give a seam for the bottom. Oh, mark the seam. Give it a seam all along the base here. just like that. So something about that should be pretty good. And I'm also just going to add a seam around this, because you've got this, what would you call it? You know, this little knobbly bit. That's the real term for it, I'm sure. It kind of extruding out of it. If you had that just sort of stuck to the rest of it, it's just going to look very, very strange. So I'm just adding a separate... Man, it's hard to click. Let's find it. That one. Yeah, just going to add a seam just around that whole bit so it makes it a separate object at least. And then if you wanted to, you could add, you know, seams for these points right there, if you really cared. And all of that. That's going to be a little bit harder to UV unwrap. We're just going to do a really quick and nasty UV unwrap for this because it's not going to be that close to the camera and you can probably get away with it not looking perfect. So now you've done that, let's just hit unwrap. And you can see you got this massive area right there, which is... how do I make it so that you can just select that part? No. L. Try again. L. There we go. Cool. I'm just going to scale that down because that's just probably that little part right there, which is really small. The part which I want it to be really filling up and using the full amount of that texture is these parts right there. So that's the most important part. Is yeah, this part right here. So I don't really know. Let's just select that there. Rotate that around. Scale it inwards a bit. Okay, that should be fine. It's not going to be perfect, of course. You can go into as much detail as you like, or as little. Doesn't really matter. The texture we're going to give this, just going to turn the specularity down a bit, something like that. Give it a texture. Now this is one, again, of CG Textures, and it is called, if I can find it on the computer, it is a rusty, rust. Starts with R. R for rust. Rust scratches. Or we could use that one. Or that one. No, we'll use this one. Okay. And I'm going to turn the saturation amount down. Because you can see, like, if I just, let's just set this to 2, for example. You can see those colors are really harsh. Like a harsh red and a harsh blue. So turn the saturation down. If you set it all the way to 0, it's going to be black and white. But if you leave it at 0.5, it's going to give it a nice kind of washed out, bleached look, which is pretty good. And I'm going to change the blend type to become multiply so that you always get the original color here showing through. And I'm also going to change the mapping to be UV as well. That's very important. Anyway, I'm going to hit Shift B and then just make a little box around that area there. That just allows you to render that one point, not the entire image. So that's, yeah, that's not bad. I mean, might probably turn down the influence of that color because it's a bit harsh, I think. And maybe the contrast, maybe to 0.5 or something. Maybe turn the influence back up. And also, if you want, you can color the metal to be like a yellowy orange type color, and that can make it look a little bit more old and weathered kind of look. So something like that should be fine. And if you really wanted to, you know what you could do is actually you could actually duplicate that texture, make it its own separate thing, and then make it affect the specularity as well, just like we did before. And that's going to I mean, I don't know, it could look alright. I don't think I actually did that for my one, but yeah, might as well give it a shot, see how it looks. Doesn't really make much difference. That's alright. I might let's turn down the influence of that texture there. That's essentially, that specular amount there becomes like pretty much like this value right there. So the more you turn that up or down, it's going to affect the specularity. Anyway, that's a very rough way of doing things, but it's giving it an alright result. I'm just going to give that same material to that clip hand there. We need to make sure we UV unwrap that though. This one's a lot easier to UV unwrap because it's a very simple looking object. I just need to drop in a seam right there, and then the same for that one there as well. And now if I UV unwrap it, it should be pretty much done perfectly if we've done it correctly. Yep, like that. Perfect. So now, let's just give that a quick render right now with the rest of the scene. And we are now coming up to the end, really. Yeah, you can see, look at that. It's got the nasty little clip area there, which hasn't it's because we added like a separate kind of seam for that area. If we just go to UV image editor, where is that area? Let me just see if I can find it. To find an area like that, you just need to select that little button there, and that'll enable you to see it show up over here. Ah, yes, you can see there. So that's essentially why that's happening. It's that area there, and it's really, really small and tiny. As I said, I mean, I'm not going to go into all, like, UV unwrap that thing perfectly because it's going to take a while, and I'm sure a lot of you can, you know, do that in your own time. So I'm just going to rotate the camera just to be at like a twisted angle like that. Just adds a little bit more, I don't know, dynamicism to the image. Just makes it look better than when it looks completely flat and perfectly normal looking. So something like that is, it's looking pretty good. I'm not entirely convinced with the specularity of it. You might want to get in there and fine tune that a little bit better, but it's, you know, it's not bad, I would say. So now we've got that, now we're going to get into compositing. So hit Control left arrow to jump to the compositor. And this is just going to be some really quick changes. Some of you might already guess one of the changes I'm going to do is I am going to give it a vignette. So let's go distortion, lens distortion, distortion amount set it to 1. And I'm going to add in a math node as well. For some reason I can hear like a DJ Megamix in my head. Some of you might know what I mean by that. No, I should say one of the readers to this site actually made a DJ Megamix of using samples from my tutorials, and he did it on the part where I'm always doing vignettes. So it was kind of like a DJ Megamix, like add lens distortion, add a blur node, because yeah, I love vignettes, so I always add it. Anyway, this is the same method I always use. You guys know how to do it. Going to set that to multiply, set it to 1 like that, and let's just add a viewer node there so you can see it's just making the corners of the edge there of the image darker. You don't want it to be maximum. Never use like a maximum vignette like that because that's just blatant. It's just asking for people to punch you, so don't do that. But anyway, something like that is fine. And I'm going to add it as a group because I'm now getting into the habit of keeping the compositor clean, because otherwise when you have huge scenes and the scene gets bigger and bigger, then it gets harder to see things. So you keep it nice and clean and you have it in a separate group like that. And then you hit Tab to open and close that box there. Or Control G to form the group in the first place. Sorry, you can't see the key presses because I'm in the compositor now. Anyway, now this is the cool bit. We're going to do the color grading. So I'm going to add a color balance node, drop that in there, and I want to give it an orangey purple type look to it. So I'm going to make the highlights a greenish color like that. Let's just make sure we've got a viewer node here, and I'm going to make the midtones a purple color like so. And that's essentially how you get that effect there. Which isn't too bad. Now what I'm going to do is drop in a filter node. Just drop that straight in there, and I'm going to set the type to sharpen, and I'm going to make it 0.1. Okay, which is that's maybe even a little bit too much. Maybe a 0.05, something like that. And that's just kind of sharpening up those textures there. Just makes it pop a little bit more than what it does just normally without it. And as well as that, I want to make it look as though the light from the background is wrapping around the image, because currently it's sticking out quite harshly from the background. So to make it blend in a little bit better, what I'm going to do is drop in a invert node, and this is going to flip the alpha. Okay, so just show you what that looks like. That's what we're seeing right there. So alpha looks like, just get this so you can see it. That's what the alpha of the image looks like, okay? So what I'm going to do now is drop in a blur node, set it to fast Gaussian, relative, let's go 1%, and I'm also going to add a mix node. I like the compositor now, like when you add something, you can make it like directly connect to something really quickly like that. It's a really cool feature. It just saves you a lot of time. Anyway, I'm going to drop that in there, set it to multiply, and then take the output from the alpha, drop that in there, make sure that multiply is set to 1. And now when you have a look at that, you should see what looks like that. And that's essentially going to be the glow around the object. So if you wanted more of a glow, then you would set this to like 2 or something. Or hey, let's go 5. Anyway, you don't want to be too much. So 1 I think should be fine for this. And then you dupe, or you just add in a new mix node. like that. See that little time saving thing? Just automatically connects it. Boom. Really, really cool. I like that. And I'm going to take the output from that multiplier and drop it into the factor right there. And now you can see we have this white outline, and that white outline is essentially this value right there. So, I mean, if you wanted to, you could take the output from the image from behind it, like so. Man, that's a little bit too much, isn't it? Anyway, normally what you would do, like some of the methods I taught in the Nature Academy, is you take the output from like the background and you blur it and then you drop it into there. But because the background for this is predominantly white, we can get away with just using this color here. So essentially whatever color you change that to be, that's going to be the color of that blur there. So you could make it purple or blue if you wanted to be unrealistic, but of course we want it to be realistic. So let's make it white. And also, if you like, you can set it to screen, and then you can turn this down, and that's going to affect how much of that glow actually comes through. So that's a really, it's just a way of like turning it down a little bit. But you can see that looks a lot nicer than it did before. Like, so that's before, that's after, and that's with all the other little effects and stuff we've applied to it. But yeah, that's essentially it, guys. I mean, it doesn't look too identical to it. I'll just check with the original one here. Yeah, like this is original. I'll just check the scratches, because something funny is going on with the scratches, that's for sure. Because the specularity for this is way, way, way overblown. And I'm just trying to work out why that's happening. So if you'll just let me check this. So scratches, I've got it set to specular. Let me just compare that to the original over here. Oh no! No! I don't know if you guys ever have that problem where you come back to Blender and then suddenly all the key functions are weird and you can't click on anything. I really hate that. It's just one of those things that happens. And you just have to roll with the punches. Okay, well I can sort of see now why the specularity is being overblown. The specularity for this one was just set to 0.2. So let's turn that down. And I think it was just set to 1 contrast like that, which I don't know how that's going to look on our one right here. But yeah, you want to make sure you tweak it a bit, experiment with these different texture values here and things like that. Might turn that contrast up a bit. But yeah, you could sort of see how you can get this effect, guys. By all means, go for it. Fiddle around with all the settings. In the next part 2 of this tutorial, we're going to be making this grenade explode. So yeah, I hope you guys looking forward to doing that, and should be a bit of fun. And yeah, join me in next week. Hope you like the tutorial. Thanks very much for watching.